Hello again, everyone. It's good to see you again. I'm Linnie Blake. I'm from the Manchester Centre for Gothic Studies based at MMU. We're a research centre that specialises in all aspects of the darkness. So it's my enormous pleasure to introduce Corin Hardy to you, director of this film, obviously, also of 2018's The Nun, and currently showrunner on Gangs of London. I love Corin's work, and this film in particular, which I've written about, and we'll probably be asking sort of, I think the word that Dom used this morning was Ponzi questions about the meanings of the film at a later point. But Corin's brought with him a presentation about the film, particularly the effects of the film. He's going to run through that first. And talk, and I think we really need to give some maximum kudos to this man for struggling with two enormous bags of prosthetics out of London on a train on a Friday night to Manchester. So for that alone, I think, Corin, we thank you.
No worries.
So I'm going to hand over to him, and I will come back at some point to ask some Ponzi questions, and then I'll hand it over to you guys, because I'm sure there's loads of stuff you want to ask.
I think you should ask any Ponzi questions during any time I'm doing this. So
okay, fair enough.
There's no structure to this.
Yep.
But I just thought if I'm coming to Manchester to screen a Hallow for you, I do called Monsters and Movies. I should bring some monsters. They are my favourite friends. So, yeah, I kind of packed them all in a bag and brought them up. So feel free when this is done to come and have a look at what you see here, which is Cora and the sort of lead. I think we call it Sinuous Hallow. And the Book of Invasions as well, which I brought, which has got a lot of illustrations in it. It's quite emotional for me watching that, actually, because I haven't watched it for a long time, and I've been in complete Gangs of London mode for 4.5 years, and which is a completely different world, but takes a similar amount of effort to kind of bring to life. But The Hallow was my first film. We made it in 2014, and it took me 8 years to get it from coming up with the idea, working on it originally with Tom DeVille, a writer who I collaborated with, and then getting it kind of financed, and then rewriting it, and then eventually going to Ireland and shooting it all over Ireland. And it was sort of about 75% location in the middle of nowhere in the peat bog fields of Ireland, largely in the rain. And it was a mission. I remember, you can probably tell a lot of the inspirations. I'm sure they're some of your favourite movies too. I wanted to do a creature feature that sort of took time to expose itself as being that, but that is ultimately what I wanted to make. But to sort of play with different sort of subgenres of horror along the way. So I originally my one-line pitch was kind of, I want to make Pan's Labyrinth meets Straw Dogs. And it was inspired by a lot of 70s movies, Straw Dogs, and films like Deliverance and Alien, and then monster movies like The Thing and Evil Dead and The Fly. And it was sort of wanting to do my own version of a kind of horror movie, which was a little bit of a love letter to monsters, with a mythology based in fairy and folklore, Irish folklore. And I knew that I didn't want to do a kind of straight gothic fairy tale that just felt fantastical, as much as I loved that too. Something like Ridley Scott's Alien was this sort of benchmark in my head of a high quality movie that had this incredible mythology and great performances, and was kind of a haunted house movie on a spaceship with a monster that had been really incredibly rendered. And Guillermo is a big influence as well. And so it was trying to marry up a story that would allow that kind of mythology, but trying to ground it in ideas that could be real. I think the idea of fairy tales and beliefs in fairy tales being real, and especially, going to places like Ireland, they're treated as sacred text almost. And so I wanted to sort of dig into fairy mythology and folklore and really kind of imagine it into reality and think how it could and finding actually a sort of link with biology and science and nature and contemporary kind of situations and human invasion.
I'd really like to ask about the Irish background to it, because this is what I've written about, because I'm working currently on contemporary Irish horror, and particularly Irish horror of the post-crash period and the ways in which it engages with that. Do you have any Irish background yourself, or was this something you came to more sort of intellectually, or were you scared by the Irish in childhood, as I was?
I wasn't, and actually after making this film, everyone assumes and thinks I am Irish, and because I've got a funny sounding name, but I'm not. I think I probably got a little bit of Irish blood there, but no, it was really, looking at monster, folklore and mythology, and trying to find a place that you could get lost in. And so, I thought about Scotland, or, there's similar mythology in Cornwall, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and anywhere that I guess you go a little bit more far-reaching, and you get into real nature and forests and mountains. And that idea that the Book of Invasions is based on is that when humans sort of arrived and they invaded nature and they drove the beings into the sort of darkness and away, and into the shadows and into the trees. So naturally you've got the cities, and fairy folklore probably doesn't hang out too much in the cities and stuff, but that was where it came from. We did a lot of research into folklore, and it is obviously enormous, and there's so many different fascinating ideas, creatures, rules. So actually part of the challenge in coming up with what was originally called The Good People. Can I switch onto my laptop, and then I can just show some visuals? So I've brought my original artwork and books. I always start in my sketchbooks here, and you can't obviously see what's in these, so I've put it onto my laptop. So forgive me if this is a bit erratic, but I just dug up a load of my old original documents. So originally the film was called The Good People, and so I made the Hallow. I shot in 2014. This was after about 4 years of work, and this was in 2010, and this was like put together to try and get awareness from producers and financiers. And my first thing here is a different kind of fairy, and it was sort of taking a look at fairy folklore and trying to imagine how it could become terrifying. And it was a case of limiting the amount of rules and folklore, so we could only concentrate on a certain amount. Otherwise, there's so many. There was a great idea that, I think, for instance, to trick a changeling into admitting it's a changeling, you had to boil some eggs, and it almost becomes too complicated to render visually. So we sort of boiled it down to a certain amount of rules. And I sort of put together photos like this, which was actually my girlfriend in a tree. And then I was drawing. A lot of what you see here was the first wave of how to do it. And budget limitations also played a factor in what I could and couldn't do. There was a lot more monsters originally. These were Spriggans. But I loved this idea that these creatures were actually kind of almost formed out of the rot and the infections and things in the forest itself, and almost like rotten leaves and animal bones and things like that. These were early drawings of this idea of the beams of a house growing buds, and Adam originally out there in the forest with a camera. He had a giant wrench at that point. Some images on his photography down here, weird imagery. That scene in Jaws, I always loved in Jaws 2, I think, when you see the photo coming through the shark's eye. Sort of set piece in the house I did, and I do all these sketches very quick and just try and sort of build a world of the movie. And you had Claire down here she had balls of wool originally instead of the yellow blanket. It was going to be the other sort of aim with the Hallow was to tell a movie that felt grounded in reality, like a relationship drama that may have no monsters in and be a psychological thriller. But as the movie goes on, and there is almost a point in the middle, which is the car starting when you first see them, it ramps into an actual fairy tale. So there's sort of imagery in that second half where you see the sort of the woodsman, you know, corrupted, turning into a creature. You have sort of the changeling, you have the banshee, and you have these sort of more classic fairy tale ideas, and the look of the whole film gets progressively more subtly heightened, you know. So I wanted to use fire and light and elements, and these were called the Slewer, which I love this idea in fairy mythology. You have the Seelie court and the Unseelie court, and the Unseelie court I hadn't heard of, but it is basically the bad fairies. So we've, you know, become accustomed with fairies being these like twinky little Tinkerbells from Disney, and, you know, and fairy stories. But a lot of even kids' fairy stories are pretty dark actually, and they deal with changelings and baby stealers and stuff. So it's also just trying to find ways of incorporating these sort of classic fairy tale ideas into this unraveling, quite simple tale of this couple. There was a whole 10-minute sequence that actually no one's seen, which when I watch it now with all this time, I do at some point want to do a director's cut, and it would really probably include the 10 minutes I lopped off for Sundance. And it actually sets up the couple a lot more, and you learn the state of their relationship and their sort of trauma around having the baby. Starts in London, and it's another story. But yeah, there is actually, I think it would probably be more powerful as an end point when you see the first 10 minutes.
And as you mentioned the baby, whose baby was it?
There's a lot of babies, right? So there's 6. There was a pair of twins, lovely Irish twins who were 5 months old, James and Joe, I believe they were called. And we just did Gangs of London, and if anyone's seen that, there's also a bunch of babies, and we had a pair of twins in that too. The gist is, you know, when one baby starts to feel tired or hungry, you swap them, and they're never actually in discomfort. Normally they're just a bit hungry, and you get a kind of 20-second bit of them crying before they get swapped that translates into some like terrible trauma going on. So there was a pair of real-life twins. There was then a fully animatronic baby, which John Nolan, who is did a formidable amount of work on this. John Nolan's studio was kind of someone who got recommended to me, a fantastic workshop. I was on the lookout for a kind of modern-day Rob Bottin, sort of Rick Baker, Stan Winston, Dick Smith character, and found him. And, I mean, at the time, and with the lack of the money that we didn't have, he did a phenomenal amount of work. After the Hallow, he went on to do the whole of the Dark Crystal show on Netflix, all of the creatures. And then he's just done Jurassic World Dominion as his latest film, and he's built the biggest dinosaurs ever on screen. So he started on the Hallow. I mean, he did a bit before the Hallow as well, but and he created these. So can't remember what your question was.
The babies.
The baby. So yeah, 2 real ones, a fully animatronic one, which was amazing and would be used in some of the shots in the second half of the film when it's kind of like acting a bit strange. But also you could do shots of characters holding the baby and it would kind of move around. Then we had a fully weighted stunt replica for all the shots when anyone's doing anything dangerous, running around, even just running down a field. You can't run with a real baby. Then we had a changeling baby. And then my own daughter played the opening baby when you see him on the boat. That was like a little reshoot about 4 months after editing when I decided to lop off the first 10 minutes of the movie. I wanted to shoot this arrival of a couple, kind of inspired by what The Wicker Man, the structure of The Wicker Man, where originally, if anyone's seen the director's cut, there's a sort of 10-minute sequence of Edward Woodward kind of going about his job, and he receives the sort of letter to come to the island, and it sets it all up, and in a way when they had cut that, and the Wicker Man, the only version of the Wicker Man I'd seen up to that point was just when you begin on the aeroplane flying in, he arrives there, you're there. So I felt kind of like what they had done was similar to what I decided to do. So my daughter Ren, who was literally the same age as the boys, she was born 2 weeks before we started shooting, and my wife and daughter came out to set 6 weeks later, and she kind of has grown up around these monsters.
That was pretty much my question. Was that your child? Because there was a shot in the making of doco in which you're sitting on a sofa with the baby, and you are holding that baby in a way that, you know, this baby's not a prop and it's not a cast member. It very much looked like it was yours.
Yeah. She's in the boat for those first shots.
That first sequence, could I just ask you about it? Because it was phenomenally interesting to me, because I'm really interested in the way that Irish horror has just exploded, and it was, as you say, filmed in Ireland, Irish Film Board supported, so I treat it very much as an Irish movie. You choose to have that radio programme playing, which is the kind of political heart of the film in many ways, and I'm really interested in I think I know what you're doing there, and I'm really interested in what you were actually doing.
What else? It was to sort of help ground it and set it in a contemporary place, which is what happened in Ireland. And when I went over there to location scout, I was looking for sort of big spooky houses, but I was shocked to see so many like huge houses that have been built that are empty, that are crumbling, and literally that house that you see in the forest is real as well. And so as a result of well, you called it the crash, right? And this idea that we're, you know, human invaders and invading nature and just fucking things up, basically. and it was in this sort of financial situation. The idea that Adam had been sent to Ireland in the opening 10 minutes that I cut, you actually see him in his job in London, and he's working for this kind of forestry commission, but he's doing like desk jobs, and his wife's got the baby at home, and they're having a stressful time. And then his superiors say, look, we want you to go to Ireland. You can get some air, you know, you have a house out there. We need you to assess a forest. But instead of it being really about nature and saving the forest, it's about they want to sell the forest. So actually that end scene is as if that forest that we've just been in, this sort of sacred place, is getting turned over anyway, and it's being sold off to, you know, different financiers.
And so stripped, denuded. There's real similarities, I thought, parallels to Lorcan Finnegan's movie No Name.
I've not seen it.
That's so interesting you haven't seen it, because he too sends an Englishman into the Irish forest. Right. And in his case, he's a surveyor, and he's there to measure the forest so that they can effectively sell it because someone's bought it up cheap at the end of... can't remember, after yours. Right. He'd obviously seen yours. Cool. And you know, something terrible happens to the Englishman in the forest in both of these films. It's a film that I think the Guardian critic, Phil Hode, I think his name is, described it as so trippy as to make a field in England look like an afternoon in the tax office. So it's a great film if people haven't seen it. But yes, Englishmen coming awry in Irish forests seem to have a distinctly political dimension going on to me.
Yeah, I'm going to carry on with these. So these were early drawings of a banshee, which sort of Cora became a version of a banshee. And these were like concepts that I'd put together. Changeling. Oh. We knew we wanted to kind of create a changeling. And actually the part of the story when things clicked was this idea of having two babies, and one's a changeling and one's not. And our kind of two protagonists' point of views are shifting because he's becoming, a creature. Didn't do wisp lights, but that was going to be in there. And we had a big kind of deer sequence where the deer got infected, which we had to reduce down, but that was a really nice model deer that we had in there. And there was kind of a bit more of a kind of Queen Alien-like Beast of the One-Horn Fairy in this early version. But I loved all the tree roots and the kind of environment. These are our characters. And I kind of plotted out the geography of how I needed it, and we found a place and was able to build and adjust. I wanted the forest to be a real barrier, like entering the forest was stepping into a world. And
how did you find the house?
God, man, I saw hundreds and hundreds. It was like finding a lead actor. I mean, there were so many specific elements that we needed from exterior and interior. And originally, I really wanted this kind of classic fairy tale cottage house that I had in my head, which I thought there's going to be a million in Ireland, you know, these like big kind of old stone walled houses. And we looked at hundreds, and I think the only ones that we found that looked amazing from the outside were actually, the walls are like a metre thick and they're really tiny inside. So actually, and I wanted somewhere cinematic that you could have. It's going to have a big geography, and it's got the different rooms. It's got his office lab. It's got a lounge. It's got a kitchen scene. It's got stairs. It's got landings, attics. And so we found this quite large. The interior of what you saw was fantastic, but the exterior wasn't what I had in mind, which is also what you saw. But and then I liked this idea that maybe because he was being posted out there, it was kind of a house owned by the Forestry Commission or something. It had a garden sloping towards some trees, but it wasn't where you see it. It was just on the edge of a coast, actually, and had the ocean there, or a big lake. So we had to do some clever, like, camera geography where you kind of join different locations together, because the location with the farm and the barn was sort of 10 miles down the road. So this was this idea of Claire having to go off on a mission to rescue Finn, coming back with him while Adam's sort of transforming in the house. This was it was originally called The Good People. He mentions the good people in the Michael's the cop.
I thought it was originally called The Woods.
It was called The Good People, and then there was a film that came out, I think, like a James Franco movie called The Good People. So I was like, we can't call it that. And then I wanted to go really simple with it, like, you know, Alien or Jaws, and what, you know, naming it in The Woods. And I know there'd been a Lucky McGee movie called The Woods, so I sort of didn't know if it was allowed to, you know, call your movie another name. And then I think in the marketing, we all agreed that we needed something more unique, and we'd been talking about the Hallow, and we also thought we can kind of create our own mythology in there as well. So it became the Hallow. So I'm going to whiz through another document. That was the early one. And then this was kind of the sales document, if I remember correctly, which was still, I don't think we'd shot it yet, but we'd started to get altitude and on board. So we kind of put this together to raise money, which sort of helped tell the story of what I wanted to do. And then I also included sketches. And I did a lot of sort of my own concept sketches of sequences that I wanted to capture a kind of tension in. And in this, you know, this sequence of creature coming up through trapdoor, the mother trying to fend it off with a torch that's running out of a wind up, and it starts growing towards her eye. Him going into the sort of den of creatures, becoming one himself. And then I did a sort of series of prosthetic designs for his transformation as he starts to change. And more kind of creature stuff and storyboards. So I'll just take you through this quickly. This was I storyboarded the whole movie, almost every scene. And this was a sort of sample scene of the car starting sequence in the middle. So you can sort of see it was in a field originally, but we shot it in a forest. He's trying to start the car. He's shining a light into the engine and sees this growth. He starts taking it out while she's getting progressively more and more nervous inside the car. She's looking in the mirror with the baby in the back seat. She's starting the keys. The lights are flickering. He's trying to get the growth out. Sees what it is, and sort of you build up the presence of the creatures. And then she starts to see something in the brake lights behind her. She starts to panic. She's revving the car, and then the light dies down. She starts to panic. He's sort of telling her, you know, when to start the car. And then there's kind of like, each time she revs it, there's more, until they get close enough. And then he sort of didn't quite get this, but, you know, there's going to be a real kind of deep rooted area that he had to get to, and I wanted to see his hand go kind of in, and then just as he's getting it, she starts the car and is going to just like take his knuckles off, and then the bonnet dropping and seeing these things behind him. And that sequence, particularly the car when it was sort of started and racing through the field, that was it was such a nightmare. It was there'd been really bad weather, and it was horizontal rain for 4 or 5 days or something. The field we had location scouted is a peat bog field, which is basically like a massive sponge, and it absorbs all the water. And so for this kind of like low budget movie, having a car sequence where the car had to sort of skid around a field and then crash in a ditch was kind of quite a big number. And it was the day I remember that the Bond company came to check on how production was going. They basically have the ability to close it down if they think you're not doing it right. And I had 5 cameras, I think, for that scene. We had the car ready, we had the stunt guys in the car, and then all of these they had like 5 creature performers all in their full suits. Those suits were like with full heads where you could hardly breathe in them. So if you imagine it's like 3 a.m. in a peat bog field, freezing cold, and you've got these performers crawling around on their hands, they can hardly see or hear, and they're having to crawl around this marshland. And then anyway, when it got to that moment and I called action, the car just wheel spinned in the mud and then slowly kind of crept forward and stopped before it got to the fence it was meant to crash through. And everyone's like looking at me. The producers and the Bond people are kind of like starting to like wonder. And it was because the stunt guy had for some reason not put down the metal tracks that you put down for the car to grip on. And it was all looking terrible at that moment. And we actually had to get a quad bike to like cable tie onto the car and pull the car through the field and then erase the quad bike and visual effects and stuff like that. So challenges of shooting this kind of stuff.
And most of the film was shot on location, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much all of it.
It's all shot on location, and then we shot the attic in the house and the den, the creature den, were the only 2 main sets that were shot sort of in a small studio in Ireland, Roger Corman's studio.
Wow.
But, you know, stuff like her going in the lake, that's really Bojana Novakovic going in the lake at 4 a.m. in November or something. It was also just like, and I was like swimming in the lake, pushing the camera boat along because we didn't have no divers or anything like that. So, yeah, we had the whole shoot was, I think it was like 28 days. It was one of those ultra memorable. I'll never forget it. But it was like every day was absolute madness trying to make it.
You hear about cursed movies. This sounds like a blessed movie, and that no one actually died.
I don't know about that. Yeah, no one died. I nearly did die at one point and I felt because there's a lot of superstition that you don't mess with fairies. Like you shouldn't tell stories about them because they don't like it. And actually, whilst out there, there was some strange occurrences where I wondered whether the fairies were disapproving of us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having been, being of Irish descent, I think it's a very brave thing to make the movie, and perhaps, perhaps a little foolish for your own self-preservation. I've been told it's pretty much time to ask some questions of the audience. So is there more you'd like to run through?
I'm just going to whiz through this last one because I brought all sorts. There is we made a really nice making of, which was all made out of my personal behind the scenes during the shoot, which is only on, I think, like the UK or the German DVD or something, and I want to get it out on a channel because it's a sort of 45-minute behind the scenes, completely like it's not slick. It's like made by me and us, I have loads of behind the scenes stills, but I don't know how long we have. But this was the last book. This was like when I got to Sundance, so I was finishing the post on the movie, and it was it was talking about creating a new monster and putting together a sort of presentation with my sketches, storyboards, and then this is what I wanted to show, some of the other creature concept art. So I got some great concept artists. This was Ivan Manzella, who took my sketches and we started to render like what they could actually be, how biologically what was happening, and then physically how we were going to create the suits, because I wanted to create everything as much as possible in camera and do it with puppetry. And so we created these suits where the puppets, there's some images of these are the maquettes up here. The sculpt, this is the deer.
Who's got the baby?
This is one of I got the baby. I got everything. That's why I've got these. We had a really nice animatronic Hallow arm for the arm that unfolds itself. I wanted to create suits that the performers could wear, that they would almost puppeteer their own extra limbs whilst crawling around with these extra limbs added on. So this was some of the full size. Connor, who played the sort of lead sinuous Hallow that gets the most, he was fantastic. He was sort of trained in animal movements, so he had the most amazing. It
was extensively choreographed, wasn't it? All the movements of the performers.
It was. We had a great guy called Peter Elliott who worked on the Greystoke Tarzan movie, playing the ape, very much like a kind of an Andy Serkis character, who was really good with creature movements and sounds. And I got him in. We did quite a in-depth process of casting the creatures by holding auditions for sort of ballerinas, contortionists, mountain climbers, theatrical performers, and we put them through a series of trials and then narrowed it down to 5. And one of them, Charlotte, who is tiny, and she could play Cora because she had a full animatronic entire head that was like putting your head inside one of the contraptions from Saw, and she had to perform that scene when Adam, played by Joseph Moore, is standing in front of her, and they have a little exchange about the baby. Joe's in full prosthetics, contact lenses. He also has a real hearing condition that means he can't hear very well. So he couldn't really hear, he couldn't see. He's got a flaming scythe. She's standing there in full animatronic head. She can't see. She can't hear. The baby's full animatronics.
See, blessed.
There's 8 guys controlling the baby. I think we had a real baby put in there for a moment. And you get yourself into those sort of interesting situations when you're trying to make a movie. And so I was kind of proud of that scene because it looks like they look like they can see each other even. But
absolutely.
This is some of the prosthetic work, really fantastic. Tristan Versluis, who created this, again, he's gone on to do all the biggest movies that we love at the moment. These were some of the creature performers to give you an idea of these extra limbs here, which are built on the shoulders down to the arms, because I wanted them in real low positions, so we built their heads on top of their heads. So if you look at this creature on the left there, the head is almost built upwards on top. So they could be looking kind of down, but their heads would be up. And then this is Peter Elliott down here. This is a bit of some of the filming. And then a bit of visual effects. And we did obviously use quite a lot of visual effects, but subtly to erase things. This was the animatronic changeling. This was kind of what the house looked like, but it wasn't in the woods, and then we put the woods in. Cora. Now, this is you can see the performer's arms just here. So it was a way of actually doing it in camera, and some of the shots with the grade, you just couldn't see the arms. Otherwise, you needed to visual effect them out. So yeah, should we do some questions?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Questions?
Anyone ask a question? I've brought 2 of the last ever Hallow T-shirts that I had printed, and I've brought 2 copies of The Nun, so I can happily throw them out to you. If you're
There's
brave
incentive
enough.
for you guys.
I think Lee Hodgkinson also had a question, maybe. Is he here? Would you like to ask your question? Then we'll come back to you in a sec.
Great film, by the way.
Thank you, man.
What it is, it's take away the focus slightly.
Yeah.
From the Hallow. It said you were speaking about doing a movie version of The Crow, a while back.
Yeah.
Is it something you'd still be interested in?
They made The Crow. They just shot it in Budapest. Yeah.
In the future?
Yeah, I love The Crow. I spent 4.5 years nearly making it, but I'd rather talk about the Hallow. I'm just wondering whether to throw you a T-shirt or not. Let's have some questions that are to do with the Hallow.
Hi there.
Hello.
I'm glad that I managed to get it. I almost missed the entire thing, but I'm glad that I managed to get a seat.
Me too.
I just wanted to ask, like, with that last scene with the baby, how much of that was actually prosthetic and how much is it just like effect?
There's a lot of, I mean, almost all of the scenes in that last half with the baby that you're seeing a mixture of all these different versions. So it sort of was dictated that obviously if there was any like drama scene close up, it's a real baby. If it's any sort of action going on, it has to be the animatronic one or the stunt one. Then there's some visual effects enhancements going on. And then actually the changeling when it came apart was intended to almost resemble that sort of old school stop motion feel. And it's a visual effect combined with a puppet. And I wanted to almost play with Adam's deteriorating point of view from when he's starting to get infected and, you know, he's getting these flashes and he's seeing that changeling kind of rendered. That's like when you're in full 100% fairy tale mode in a way. So you're seeing that actual changing come apart and you're seeing Adam transformed in a forest. Would you like a medium or a large Hallow t-shirt or a copy of The Nun?
Can I get a medium shirt?
Yeah. I'm going to throw it. I may have lied, and they may only be large, but they're quite small large. See if I can get it to you.
Row 7, I reckon. Oh, very good.
Hi, Corin.
Hey.
I'm Nain. I'm studying at the Film and Screen School here in Manchester. And one of my questions is that one thing that really stood out for me in your movie was the lighting and also the sound as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of elaborate, like, what was your concept when it came to pitch deck or when it came to your directorship? What was like the concept when it came to the actual sound itself and light itself? Because that's for me that really stand out in
The sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the lighting was really key. The cinematographer Martijn van Broekhuizen is a Dutch DP. It was the first time we'd worked together, but I'd heard lots of things about him. And actually, I'd had a DP on board to shoot this, and then he, at the last minute, he had sort of owed someone else a movie before me, so he disappeared. And actually, as I got into pre-production, had to find a DP quite quick. Martijn, who I've worked with since on everything, and he shot all of my gang stuff. He's a master of light. I mean, he's a real like artist, and you know, like a Dutch kind of art house kind of DP. So I kind of wanted to combine his like beautiful art house cinematography with my heavy genre vibes. And that's what the kind of the balance helped the tone of the movie feel like grounded but fantastical, and it sort of like merged together. But also in terms of like horror movies and atmosphere and mood, but also with the Hallow built into the sort of mythology of how light's used. The light sources were always really critical in terms of when it's dark, when it's moonlight, when it's electrical light, when it's wind-up torch light, when it's firelight, and when it's natural light. So it was all scrutinized through in the prep, and then sound is, as you know, kind of 50% of everything, you know. And I worked in Steve Flanagan in Ireland, fantastic guy, and I just keep layering and layering and layering. So there's a lot of, you know, sound effects and natural sound and weird stuff. We did all the creatures ourselves, so I was able to kind of stuff. We did, you know, we had a lot of fun creating the creature sounds and trying to actually build a kind of strange, the closer you get and towards the end, there's a sort of communication like a family almost going on. And we didn't want them to just be roaring and stuff, but yeah.
Okay, we'll probably
Here you go.
one last question.
This is almost the last t-shirt that exists. Oh, hey, nice. It was illustrated by Dave Lupton, who did all the illustrations in the Hallow book and did the Nun book and does all my illustration stuff.
Sim, this lady down here had her hand up first, I think.
Thanks. Hi, Corin. I'm Danny.
Hey, Danny.
Hi. I really liked it because I really like folk horror in general.
Nice.
And, me and my friend John, we were speaking just as it ended, and we were wondering because you probably wrote all the backstories. But you know, Corn, the guy with the shotgun,
Say again?
the farmer guy, the ferreting guy. I can't remember.
Column.
Yeah.
Yeah, Corn.
Michael McElhatton played him, yeah.
Yeah, right. His character, was the motivation for actually staying there? Was he considering himself more of like a protector for other people to warn them off, or was he wanting to stay to sort of see his daughter?
I think that's a good question. I think it was he'd never wanted to leave because his daughter was taken one day, and so although he's terrified and living in fear, he's also wanting to be close to her. He's an emotional wreck. He also is trying to protect people. He's just not a very good communicator, so he looks like he's just terrifying them instead. So yeah, I guess again playing with the points of view, we're making him appear much more sort of intimidating when you first meet him than when you actually sort of see he's quite and also playing into the sort of theme of the movie with this intro. It's not, you probably can't afford to move anywhere else, you know.
Exactly.
He can't afford, and he's got this house. I mean, I love that location. It was like a proper fairy tale house with this huge forest beyond it. Yeah, would you like a DVD or a Blu-ray of The Nun? You don't have to have it, by the way. Which one? I won't throw this one. I'll probably brain someone. I don't know which one he said, but that's a DVD, that's a Blu-ray.
Last question, if you would. Excellent movie. Yeah, I'm a bit of a folklorist.
Thanks.
Cryptozoology and paranormal research.
Oh man, that's awesome.
I interview people who've seen really weird stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I'm always fascinated by their reaction.
Mm.
How did you research that in terms of looking at what would be an appropriate reaction of somebody who has seen something that shouldn't really exist?
Do you mean in the performance of the actors?
Yeah.
That's a cool question. I don't know. I wouldn't say I researched how to kind of find a reaction, but in the casting of those actors, Joe Moore, who particularly is just such a committed actor, it would never work to say, you're looking at this creepy monster with funny eyes and stuff. He can't act to imagine that. And actually, he can't be scared of something that's in front of him. Particularly, it really helps to have the monsters. But really, with him, it was a case of creating directions that could give him this emotional reaction. So when he looks at himself in the mirror, you know, he's reacting to this idea that his child is gonna grow up without him, and he's failed as a father, and he knows he's gonna become these creatures. So he's having like an incredible performance, which is probably nothing to do with the monsters that you see, but it's to do with, you know, what drives him. And different actors work in different ways, but you know, other times, you know, I would do sound effects actually. I mean, that's the most helpful thing. You know, if we're doing something where Boyana Claire has a shock about something, you know, I would we'd shoot and make sure it's very quiet, and then I might have a pair of wood blocks, or I'd do suddenly that she would suddenly like, at least she can kind of start her own emotional reaction to it.
That's
I'm afraid we have to wind it down now because we're running out of time.
There's a copy of The Nun for you there. Thanks very much. Thank you. And thanks for coming out. I wasn't sure, you know, it's a kind of a lesser known movie, and you know, it did get a cinema release, but I was just really happy to be able to show it again. And thanks for coming.
brilliant.
Really
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Come at me and we'll sort this out.
I'm going to take the creatures
I've got
myself.
a few notes that- can they carry them out?
If someone, I'll show you how. Let me show you how.
Make sure I don't want to, because they're quite hold it under there.
Okay, that's fine. And then if you carry that under there, that's fine.